For years, a carved stone head sat in a house in coastal Georgia. Sandstone, hand-cut, weathered by long years outdoors before anyone now living saw it. A broad hat, deep-set eyes, a mouth closed the way an old man's mouth closes when he has decided not to argue. It was understood, by the family that kept it, to be Opothleyahola of Tuckabatchee. This film is about what happened to it, and about a question that most of us will never be forced by law to answer, and will therefore have to answer for ourselves. He was born at Tuckabatchee, the senior town of the Upper Creeks, on the Tallapoosa River, in what is now Alabama. Tuckabatchee was not an ordinary town. It was the ceremonial anchor of the Upper Creeks, keeper of the sacred metal plates and of the busk fire that sits at the center of the square ground religion. To speak for its council was to stand at the institutional heart of the Southeastern ceremonial order. He came of age as a Red Stick traditionalist. He opposed the fraudulent Treaty of Indian Springs. He argued in Washington. He resisted removal until removal could no longer be resisted. And then he went west with his people and rebuilt the town on the other side. Muskogee tradition holds that the name Yahola carries a sense close to saintly. He was not simply a politician who happened to be traditional. He was a medicine man, a spiritual leader, a chief of chiefs. When the Creek National Council signed a treaty with the Confederacy, he refused it. Loyal and neutral Creeks, Seminoles, and free and enslaved black people gathered at his plantation, and in November he started north for Kansas with roughly 9,000 followers. 3 battles followed, and then a flight through the worst of the winter. An estimated 2,000 died of battle, disease, and exposure. His own daughter was among them. He died in a refugee camp near the Sac and Fox Agency in March of 1863, and was buried beside her. 20 years after his death, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs issued the Code of Indian Offenses, which made the work of the medicine man a punishable act and criminalized the dances and the gatherings. It stood for half a century. In 1931, John Swanton published a survey of the modern square grounds of the Creek Indians and mapped town after town in Oklahoma with a living fire and a working busk cycle. He was documenting, as a going concern, practices that were at that moment still a federal offense. Enforcement ended in January of 1934. Statutory protection did not arrive until 1978. The order survived that century because people carried it, at cost, when carrying it was a crime. That is the man the stone was carved to honor. The objects came together in Opothleyahola in September of 1985. A family visiting an uncle received them from a Muskogee chief. The bust, a signed portrait dated the 20th of September, a ceremonial pipe, feather and display pieces. The bust, the chief said, had been standing in his backyard a long time. It was covered with moss and lichen when it changed hands. Honesty about what is known matters here, so here is the boundary. There is no inscription on the stone. Nothing carved into it says who it is. The identification rests on family provenance, carried carefully and told consistently, and on the company the object keeps. The bust was carved at some point before 1985. How long before, nobody can presently say. It is an honest object with an honest gap in its history, and inflating that gap would not honor anybody. In 1990, Congress passed the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, and made a law out of what ought to have been a courtesy. It binds federal agencies and the museums that take federal money. It has moved ancestors and funerary objects and sacred items back to the nations they were taken from, slowly, and against resistance, and it is one of the few statutes in American Indian law that has actually returned something. But the law stops at the institution's door. An enormous share of Native material culture in this country has never been in a museum at all. It is in private houses, in collections built at estate sales and flea markets and by inheritance. There is no register of it, no claim process against it, and no authority that can compel any of it home, which means that the great majority of returns that will ever happen will not be ordered by anyone. They will be chosen or not chosen, one person at a time, in private with nobody watching and nothing at stake but what the person thinks is right. That is the whole argument for why an ordinary collector's decision is worth a film. Not because a single grouping changes the balance of anything, because the decision is the only mechanism there is. On the 1st of August, 2026, the grouping was given away. No payment, no exchange, no condition attached to it. It was received by 2 enrolled citizens and leaders of their community, Red Crane, a healer-in-chief, and Lanier A. Davis, a writer and keeper of oral histories. The written reply, that same afternoon, was this: I'm honored as well, and I will take very good care of it. And then something happened that is worth more than the objects. Within the hour, the pipe was named, not a display piece, not a ceremonial-style object of uncertain function, as an outsider working from photographs had been forced to call it. A peyote pipe, large copper beads, horsehair, and the small painted marks on it, which had sat in the record for months described only as motifs, were red, lightning, raining out of the water, out of the lake. Consider what that means. The knowledge did not exist in the collection. It could not be extracted from the object by any amount of careful looking, by anyone standing outside the tradition. It came back into the record at the exact moment the object came back to the people, and from the same people, and it could not have arrived any other way. Return is not subtraction from the historical record. On the evidence of this one afternoon, return is the thing that completes it. One correction, because the record should be exact even when exactness is less flattering. This was not a repatriation in the legal sense. No agency was involved. No museum, no claim, no finding. A commemorative grouping made in 1985 is not the kind of property the statute governs. It was a gift, and that, in the end, is the stronger fact. Nothing compelled it. No law reached it. It happened because someone decided that objects made to honor a Muskogee leader belonged with Muskogee people, and then acted on the decision, which is the harder half. It rained the following day, hard and without stopping from morning until night. That proves nothing, and the written record of all this says so plainly in its own section, kept well away from the evidence. But a man is allowed to stand in the rain after doing a thing like that and feel that it was answered. The objects were made to honor a man who kept a fire through the decades, when keeping it was a federal crime. They are now held by people who keep it still. That is what they were for. This film accompanies the combined master report on the grouping, its provenance, and its transfer. Barrows Research, 2026.